This is State Representative Kerry Condata inviting you to watch our new and improved 12th District 2.0 show. Guest hosts John Wise and Shiloh Shower bring it all home with yours truly, Kerry Condata.
Welcome to the 12th District with recovering politician Kerry Condata. It is the second week of session in Olympia, and in just a few minutes we'll be hearing from both state representatives Mike Steele and Keith Gaynor via Skype direct from Olympia. We're going to be doing this every week to make sure you know precisely what's going on without the filters from Olympia. We're also going to have a little news today on the national side. We're going to talk about what are the issues in the states, all across the states. And at the end of the program, I want to talk a little bit about one of the most hideous legislative bills that have ever been passed, as far as I can remember, and the celebration around it. I think you know what I'm talking about. We'll be right back with the news. This is the 12th District.
Squirrel Tree at Cole's Corner in Leavenworth is the place to be. New bar, 8 TVs, 2 pool tables, darts, live music, and great food.
Welcome back to the 12th District. Kerry Condata with you. We will be visiting with both of our state representatives in just a few minutes, but first some news. Well, news, or is it fake news? This seems to have reared its ugly head again in the last few weeks, with leaked stories, bad stories, completely wrong stories. Can it get any worse? Can this situation really ever change? It's going downhill in a hurry. You heard the Catholic school story from Kentucky, the visitors to the Washington Mall and all of that went on. You heard about leaked stories where the president was going to be imminently gone within the next few days, turned out to be fake. And of course, the story you're hearing on the border and the shutdown has not been entirely accurate either. There's a lot of people blaming everybody for this. The fact is, let's look at how it works. The House has to pass a bill. The Senate has to pass a bill. And the only reason it would be the president's problem is if he vetoed that bill. If he does not veto a bill, then it clearly sits with the Congress between Representative Pelosi and Senator McConnell. So before we start pointing fingers, obviously there is a standoff and may still be, but the fact is Congress is the one again that needs to move. And this is the problem with so many things. The Congress can't get things to the president's desk, good or bad, and yet the president seems to take the blame for not getting it done. Well, that's all part of the news cycle. In a new article that was just released, it says 93% of Americans from both political parties agree that the behavior of the press and the politicians themselves is getting worse. It's getting more, the incivility is getting worse, and we think we see that on a daily basis. The divide is getting wider. Now, part of that problem could come from this. A latest civic survey from Johns Hopkins University. This is amazing figures. Most people say they are relatively happy with their state governments, not so much with the federal government, but here's the problem. In the survey, 59% of the people could not name the name of their state governor. That's right, couldn't place the governor's name, 59%. 81% surveyed could not tell you who their state representative was, and 72% could not name either their state or their congressional senator. Folks, we have a serious problem with people not understanding how the system works. We have a serious problem with people not understanding basic economics. Frankly, civics is something we better start to teach in this country. We're all going to be in an awful lot of trouble. This is part of the problem with the communications we're having, is people just simply don't understand how the system works. They listen to the press, they take it for granted, and off they go. Unfortunately, I see most of the folks I'm hearing from and seeing on social media have no clue what they're talking about. They just don't have the experience or knowledge to be able to say what it is they want to say and make any sense of it. So we'll see if we can improve that. I know there's been a lot of bills to increase civics education in school, but so far the numbers are getting worse every year. People do not understand how their own government works and therefore cannot weigh in with a legitimate argument. That is a serious problem. Now, what are the states talking about as far as issues this year? We're going to be talking to our state legislators in a few minutes to see what's going on in Olympia, but what's happening across the United States? There are about 8 to 9 major policy issues that are fairly universal across the states. The number one being budgets. Kind of hard to believe since revenue is at an all-time high in most states, including this one, but budget issues still reign supreme. States are not making ends meet. They're being forced to raise taxes, well, at least they say so, because they can't seem to control spending. Part of that is the next issue, education funding. We've seen teacher strikes in LA and other places. It seems like education funding is a problem across the United States. Now, we thought we'd solved it here with the McCleary decision, but as you're going to hear from your state representative shortly, teachers are still coming to Olympia and still saying $8 billion wasn't enough. We need more. Healthcare issues. There are a few states now moving towards a single-payer healthcare system by trying to expand Medicaid. The problem is none of them have figured out how they're going to finance or pay for it, but that is the movement in several states, and healthcare will be an issue here. If you've looked at your healthcare premiums or your deductibles lately, you know it's a disaster. Opioid issues. As opioid overdoses become one of the largest death factors in the United States, surpassing auto accidents now, something has to be done in this realm. The fact of the matter is I don't think anybody has an answer that's easy, but some progress has been made. It's still going to be talked about all over the United States. All right, workforce, a big issue here and across the United States as manufacturing picks back up. We are short of workers in the trades, primarily electricians, plumbers. A lot of these trade folks are getting older and retiring. There aren't new people to replace them, and it's going to be a substantial problem for our workforce in the coming years, especially as we start to replace infrastructure throughout the United States. This is an area we've worked on here in Washington, and we are making some progress, but we need a lot more technical skilled workers for the future. The average laborer here in the state is about 56 years old. Most of them retire in their early 60s. You can see the writing on the wall. Also, transportation. New article out. Washington State is ranked 48th in quality of transportation and infrastructure out of the 50 states. Now and we are the worst in the continental United States. Alaska and Hawaii are actually not counted in this particular study. So we are the worst transportation system, but yet we have some of the highest transportation taxes in the nation. That tells me there's some serious management problems. We've seen it, we've tried to cure it, but it's very difficult to do in the state of Washington with the current administration. Privacy, security, online, you all are aware of that, how many companies, how many programs are being developed. It's hard for the law to stay ahead of the technology. That is an issue that is going to be talked about for some time. Again, no easy answers. Energy and climate issues continue to be a major topic across the United States. Where do we go from here? How much can we afford to change our energy policy? And if we do we have the infrastructure to handle it? Last but not least, after the last election, there was a lot of concern about voting. There are a lot of states now talking about new voting laws, new securities, and other things to make sure that our voting process is legit. I think the Washington State does a reasonably good job. It was not that way 10 years ago, but a lot of things have changed, and I feel that we're doing a pretty good job here, although we did have some anomalies in some of the counties. Well, there you have it. There's some of the issues that are rising to the top across the United States. We'll be right back with our state representatives Mike Steele and Keith Gaynor to see what is rising to the top in Olympia in this second week of session. We'll be right back.
For all the latest news in North Central Washington, go to ncwlife.com or find us on Facebook. Got a news tip? Email us at news@ncwlife.com or call 888-2020.
Welcome back to the 12th District, ladies and gentlemen. We are happy to have both of our state representatives here from Olympia on the Skype. We do have some technical delays today, but we will be working through it. And we want to talk to these guys a little bit about what's going on in the second week in Olympia. It doesn't sound like things have slowed down at all. But gentlemen, could you talk to us about what you do on a daily basis? Just let the folks know what, at this point, I should say, in the session, what exactly are you doing daily over there?
Thank you. Well, actually, it's a very full day for me. I mean, it starts early and ends late. There's just a number of people that have been coming over, which has been great. It's very informative to get insights into a number of different items that really haven't been on my radar in the past. I mean, when you talk about the Puget Sound pilots, it's something that in the 12th Legislative District, we don't have a lot of pilots. So, I mean, it really is very enlightening to get that input. Our days are pretty full also with committee meetings, and those committee meetings are they are full every day, and it's amazing to me how much legislation is being passed or being passed through our committees.
All right, Mike, give us your take.
Yeah, I would just say that, I agree with Keith. Our schedules are incredibly full, and Carrie, after being over here for so long, what that looks like. But for the general public, our responsibilities too really dictate our schedule. And so Keith has some heavy, very weighty committees, and I have some very heavy, weighty committees. And then when you're a ranking member like I am for education, that comes with planning meetings. When you're on 2 budget committees, that comes with planning meetings that you throw in on top of what you're doing on the daily basis. So for instance, this evening we'll finish with appropriations, the actual committee meeting at 5:30, and we'll immediately go into capital budget negotiations from 5:30 until 6:30, and then we'll do another K-12 appropriations briefing probably from 6:30 to 8:30, and try to throw in a couple of receptions as well, and then just do it all over again the next day when you're trying to work on getting constituents in to meet with you also. And this year is the first time where I've actually had to pass constituents in the hall and apologize to say I really would love to meet with you, but our schedules this year are so tight that it's not like anything I've seen in my 3 years here, heading into my 4th, so pretty amazing.
So this doesn't sound like the regular 9 to 5 by any means, and I know that isn't the case, especially now, as you said, with all the extra meetings going on and the committees and then all the people that want to see you. Is there any specific groups or group that you notice that there's kind of taken the lead here? Is there any specific subject that is getting more attention at this point?
Well, I would say that we're seeing quite a substantial amount of activity in the education committee, if you will, from the paraeducators and the educators, or the Washington Education Association. We're dealing with issues across the whole of the state where districts are claiming to have been really hurt in this McCleary decision. And as we were just having a briefing meeting right before I came into the room here, you can argue all day long that we may not have done everything right or that we missed some pieces, but your court, your state Supreme Court, has said we have fully funded basic education in the way that we were supposed to, and they've approved. So we have to move past McCleary, and we have to start looking at real solutions for student success. And if we don't start talking about student success, we're never going to get out of this black hole that is education. We're going to have, we have job security in education for the next, 5 decades. So let's continue to have the conversations, but let's also agree to move past this basic education conversation.
Well,
and from my perspective, Mike is, as he mentioned with education, that's an ongoing discussion that will consume the whole session. But what I would say is that what I'm dealing with are just things that people are coming in on specific bills that are right before the committees right now, and so they're coming in and giving their last minute insights, and hopeful that have an impact on the way the legislation passes out of committee.
Well, I got to tell you, from the news around here, from the Wenatchee School District, you'd think they're going to close the doors. It sounds like they're just in a full-scale panic, so it'll be interesting to see how this pans out. I know the next big thing coming up, transportation. Keith, you sit on that committee. Tell us a little bit about what's going on. I think you have a big hearing today, actually.
Well, what's going on in transportation right now is really giving us all an overview of the budget and the responsibilities that the state has. There's a number of new members to the committee, and obviously, I'm one of those. And we don't always, all of us have a real clear understanding of the scope of that transportation committee. It goes beyond just the roads. I mean, some of the regulations that come before us too. And so we've dealt with a few smaller items, and we've been getting briefings on the bigger picture of transportation throughout the state of Washington.
Well, I guess we'll find out more about the carbon tax, the gas tax, and everything in the coming weeks. There is a lot of rumbling based on the governor's speech about these increased taxes. Eastern Washington, of course, most people not very happy with that idea. As a matter of fact, there are bills now floating to separate the state into the Liberty State. Now, this has been talked about, but we actually have bills on paper. Do you see any, I know that's a long shot, but is there any traction at all or energy around that idea?
I personally have not been contacted by anyone that are putting those bills forward, and I haven't really had any real discussions, any serious discussions about that.
I don't think it's going to come up to any sort of level of notice because we have so many big issues we're trying to tackle this year. And in dealing with the governor's proposal, there are some economic realities we're trying to help him understand as it relates to the urban-rural divide and what that really looks like. You know, we set in capital budget and just heard a briefing from the Orca Whale Task Force. The capital budget will be handling the largest portion of the budget of the governor's request. It's almost $600 million out of the capital budget that he's asking for. So we're working on those things, you know, and you know, when you represent a district like mine, where we have lots of lakes and beautiful rivers, you kind of wonder, you know, what are we benefiting from and how are we making sure that we're being good stewards of those dollars, while trying to do our part to protect the environment, and getting a handle on the actual numbers as it relates to some of these things is really important. The governor is really off base on some of his requests as far as what we can afford as a state, and so those are things we're looking at, and I think those are going to really take precedent over the sort of smaller messaging bills.
All right, with just a few minutes left to go, would you like to add anything, any other items I've missed or specific things that maybe you see trending in Olympia in the second week?
Well, one of the things that I would say is that in talking with the constituents and other interested parties about specific things throughout the state, I mean, we have some things on the books right now that we're not able to fund, and they really are services that we've made commitments to. And as I mentioned before, it really has become more and more apparent how important it is for the state government to really determine what our priorities are. What are we going to spend our money on, rather than branching out into new significant expenditures for things that we really can't quantify. And that's something that has been very apparent to me, is that we do have some unfunded needs that should be addressed before we move on to other things.
The trend in Olympia right now is spend. You know, where we are seeing these astronomical requests for revenues in a year where we've seen, in a biennium where we've seen amazing positive economic growth. You know, you kind of have to sit back and say, okay, there is a point where enough really is enough, and we can't really afford any more without significantly damaging the economy and significantly damaging those communities that already have higher levels of poverty, already have higher levels of homelessness, and we're compounding that by asking for more out of the pockets of the taxpayers.
All right, gentlemen, we'll have to ask one more question because I saw it come up on a positive note. It looks like we are making some more forward progress on fire fighting, fire prevention, moving some new ideas forward. Last year was a better year. I think we had better response times. Do you feel like we're going to make even more progress this year on the wildfire issue?
Absolutely. I mean, it's become an issue of statewide significance, right? So once you start impacting downtown Seattle with a little bit of smoke, suddenly the issue rises to a larger conversation, and we're not in it alone anymore when the whole of the state is recognizing that we could be adversely impacted. And if we start to talk about climate change, you know, and that's a governor's priority, I think he has to be very, very clear that one of the largest contributors to carbon emission in Washington state are these forest fires. So it has to be part of his initiative. Okay.
Well, last words, gentlemen. We have about a minute left. Would you like to say anything to the folks here back home?
Well, I'm enjoying the experience, although it is somewhat overwhelming. But it's good to feel like you have an opportunity to influence some of the direction of the legislation, and I have had that opportunity, and it will be beneficial to the citizens of the 12th district and the state as a whole. So it's good to be here and to see from legislating from this perspective.
And I would say that Keith is being modest. He has done an incredible job in his first 2 weeks. He's already earned the respect of the caucus members and people across the aisle. So it's really been good to serve alongside him. We miss you in Olympia, Carrie. Your name comes up a lot, and not in vain. It comes up a lot. But we are really glad to have Keith, and we're excited to do the good work on behalf of the people of the legislative district. Speaking of, if you want to get a hold of us, or have comments or concerns about anything you're hearing, you can call us toll-free at 800-562-6000, and that will get you to our offices.
That's right. That's the hotline, 1-800-600. Oh, whatever you said, Mike. I'll put it up on the screen for you because I think it's really important that people do participate. Gentlemen, It's good to see you. Keep up the good work. I know that it's going to be busy for the next few weeks, but we appreciate you taking the time to report back, and we'll see you a week from today right here on the 12th District. We'll be right back.
Stay up to date with what's happening in North Central Washington. Go to the NCW Life Community Calendar at ncwlife.com.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. A wrap from our state representatives back in Olympia. We'll be with them every week to find out how things are going. They will start to ramp up here shortly. We're getting into the major committee meetings. There's been some huge hearings with big turnout around gun control, transportation, taxes. We'll be tracking this every week. Now, on a personal note, I believe as a legislator for 16 years, one of the worst laws I've ever seen passed happened last week or the week before, depending, in New York. The New York Assembly did some interesting things, but most of all, they took on abortion and they made it totally legal up till birth. Basically, they took most of the restrictions off so that you can abort a child all the way up until birth. What a hideous situation that is. I take that very personally offensive. It's very personally offensive to me, and I think to most people. It has created quite a stir. But the fact is, I'm reminded by legislators in the state of Washington that the law is the same here. However, we didn't light up our buildings with pink lights and dance in the streets about it, like New York did, and then promptly give themselves a 20% raise in the legislature right after they passed that bill. We haven't talked about it much, but I'm sure it's going to come up because Seattle probably will follow suit soon, and that does not bode well for the rest of the state of Washington. Well, that's it for today, folks. We'll wrap it up. We'll be back next week with week 3 of the session with Mike and Keith. We'll be covering some more national news. One of these days, we're going to get John Wise in here to talk about that immigration issue. We'll see how it's panning out. It's something that has to happen soon. This is the 12th District with Kerry Condata, recovering politician. We'll see you next week.
Are you wanting high-speed internet but don't have access to PUD fiber? Try Sky-Fi high-speed wireless internet from LocalTel. Call 888-8888 today.